It's my pleasure to be here. I realize I'm the last speaker. It's probably been a long day. You're probably getting tired. Therefore I decided not to go into too much depth in many of the points that I'm touching upon. You can just follow up and send me emails or whatever, or discuss. And there'll be lots of pictures to rest your eyes. But anyway, I was asked to speak about, there's a project here in the restoration of wetlands in Skalholt. But that I decided to actually expand that a little bit, because that will only take a few minutes actually to tell you about that. And so the title is Some Thoughts on Their Value and Their Relevance in the Greater Context. And greater context, well, talking about greater context, I'm going out into space again. I talked about the atmosphere, but that's where I want to start. This is the International Space Station, as probably all of you have realized. And it's there flying, it's out there in space. And lots of the units and instruments we see that are in the space station are not fit for the research per se, but to maintain livable conditions within the space station. It's a home for the astronauts for even extended periods. Some have been there, I think, over a year even. And it's a very, very hostile environment. There's issues of very harmful radiation, freezing cold, what to do with waste products, the buildup of gases inside, moisture, human waste, issue with food and waste, and various things like that, energy needs, all kinds of things. Most of the stuff you see is just to maintain, to be able to operate this unit in this hostile environment. But in the background there's another home, planet Earth, floating around in the same space, same hostile space, so to speak. Yet conditions it's livable. We can live there and life is there. And there are certain physical, chemical, biological, ecological processes that maintain these conditions so that it's livable in this hostile environment. And there were a couple of papers in 1997 that really were key papers in this regards, in terms of trying to, and this is towards ecosystems, it's trying to understand the value of some of these processes in ecosystems, particularly in terms of maintaining livable conditions. Various processes and functions of ecosystems that benefit us, and when these processes benefit us, we term them ecosystem services. They're services to us. And this is the most famous, a paper by Robert Constanza et al. In 1997, where they used acknowledged, proven economical methods to estimate what they could of these services rendered by these ecosystems. There was another publication the same year by the Ecological Society of North America, Gretchen Daly et al., 1997, same subject, ecosystem services benefit supplies to human societies by natural ecosystems. And there's a long list of services. I'm just showing you some of them. Biogeochemical cycling, the cycling of carbon, nitrogen, and so on, soil development, all these systems have proven the soil that we grow all our food on. Breakdown of waste products, carbon sequestration, food protection, fiber protection, energy protection, medical compounds, recreational services, breakdown of harmful substances. Just picking out some that we are all familiar with, purification of water, prevent droughts, and so on and so forth. So, and in his papers, or their paper, Constanza et al., they used these economical methods to try to estimate it. And this was a total underestimate because they couldn't estimate everything. They just put the price on what they could estimate. And they compared it to the global gross national product at the time, and found that ecosystem services were at least worth twice as much. Now, this is difficult to understand because this is a global scale, huge number. What does this global gross natural product mean, and so on? So let's take an example. This is the New York City water supply system. Down here is New York City, and this is the Catskills fountains, watersheds there, and they supply clean water down to New York City. But due to degradation of the ecosystems up there in the Catskills, before it became overwhelmed by agriculture and sewage runoff, the watersheds of the Catskill Mountains provided New York City with water ranked among the best in the nation by consumer reports. When the water fell below quality standards, the city investigated what it would cost to install an artificial filtration plant, a technological solution to the problem. The estimated price tag for this new facility was $6 to $8 billion plus annual operating cost of $300 million. A high price to pay for what once was free. New York City decided instead to invest a fraction of the cost, $660 million, to restore the natural capital or restore the ecosystems it had in the Catskills watershed. So this is an example of the services that these systems render. And in Gretchen Staley's et al. Paper, they've concluded that ecosystem services are essential to civilization, and these services operate on such a grand scale and in such intricate and little explored ways that most could not be replaced by technology. Okay, let's get back to little Iceland. And let's go talk about one of these ecosystems, wetlands. I'm not going to discuss all the many possible ecosystem services or functions of wetlands, but I'm going to give you a survey of some of these. What services do they render, or what functions? Well, first of all, they are important in terms of biological diversity. There are many species that are specialists in wetland environments. For example, over 80% of all Icelandic bird species utilize the wetlands at some point or another in their annual cycle. And there are many plant species that are specialized in wetlands, like cotton grass. And the landscape, if we didn't have the wetlands, would be much more, would be really depaupered in terms of biodiversity. And these plants in the wetlands, they of course, like plants in all systems, they grow and capture. In the process of growing, they capture carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And they're very important in these peatlands, especially the myr, peatlands, these type of wetlands. Because of the soil being totally soaking wet, the plant remains. When the plants die back in the fall, they do not break down like in dry upland systems. So it builds up. Plant remains organic matter over time. The plants are really rooted in their forefathers and foremothers, if you could say so. So it builds up over time, and we have meters of thick layers of plant remains, peat. We have measured this, for example, here in Iceland, and this has been measured in many places of the world. And since last glaciation, these systems have taken tremendous amounts of carbon dioxide or carbon out of the atmosphere and stored it in the form of peat. And the carbon stored in peatlands today is equivalent to 1/3 of all the carbon in the atmosphere. So it's a considerable storage of carbon, and it's important to keep it there. It's just like, it's not really any different from coal and oil. It's carbon removed out of the atmosphere in years past. So this has resulted, I'm showing you the main soil types in Iceland. This is the soils of our deserts, very little organic carbon in it. And this is a typical dry heathland soil with some organic matter or carbon, organic carbon. And then we have the peatland soil. They can have up to 0.5 ton per square meter of carbon in the form of organic matter. So a tremendous amount of carbon. It's by far the greatest storage of carbon in Icelandic ecosystems. Since we're talking about soil, that's another function of the system, or something that a process they do over time is to form soil. And we know the importance of soils, but most ecosystems, of course, do this also. And these are the main Icelandic wetland soils. They are variable in how much carbon they store. The one, the histosol, stores the most. And there's a tremendous amount of nutrients stored there, and there's nutrient cycling, and these are traditionally very fertile soils. So they're important in terms of nutrients and fertility. That's another function, or even a service. Okay. Then the systems are very important in terms of water regulation in the landscape. Here we, for example, see the entire bottom of the valley is a peatland with up to 4 or 5 meter thick peat layer, and it's chock full with water. It stores a lot of water. It even influences the microclimate. But the capability of these systems, when it's a rainy season, they're like sponges. They can swell up and capture a lot of water, and then when it's a drought, it doesn't rain for some weeks, it releases slowly water. So it maintains a much more steady flow in the rivers or streams that receive water from this in the landscape, rather than the landscape very removed of the water. All the wetlands, you have much more fluctuation. You lose the buffering capacity of the landscape, of the wetlands within the landscape. So that's another function. And then if you get more direct services that we get over time, this is traditional land use in Iceland, how we have used these peatlands. These are services that are much more direct. And that's, for example, these are all peat mining areas. We would take peat out, and this is what we would burn to heat our houses, but also to build the old Icelandic turf or sod houses. We use them for grazing animals, especially horses, somewhat sheep, and cows also, but the drier area, or not maybe the soaking wet areas. And then what we call engja, or the seasonally flooded peatlands or wetlands, were really important in terms of the very fertile systems, and that you could always rely on them in terms of getting enough hay for your livestock, so that you can survive over the winter time. And this was really important, even during hard years, difficult years, where the upland drylands failed. You could count on these systems. And here we see in the old days when they would be taking hay back to the farm from these kind of sites. So this is the traditional use. So just to conclude, wetlands have numerous functions or services, and most of them are of considerable value to us. Now we've entered another phase in our utilization of the peatlands in Iceland, and we started draining them. We started this really in the Second World War, 1940 approximately. This is an image from that time period. And it was subsidized by the government. This is the length of ditches excavated yearly, so we see that it becomes very popular, and it reaches height here in the 65 approximately. And it's actually still ongoing, but this is the period when it was fully subsidized by the government. We are up to we've excavated approximately 33,000 kilometers of ditches. It's almost around the world. This was actually, it revolutionized in farming in some areas, and there were quite a bit benefits to this in the beginning, and especially in the beginning in this phase. This was making hay fields close to the farm, a dense network of ditches around the farms. And in many areas of Iceland where there were lots of peatlands, this was maybe the first time in history of the settlement of Iceland that these farmers in these regions could gather enough hay to be sure in terms of to survive the winter in terms of the livestock. So it did change a lot of things, and we've actually done a study. We see a good correlation with this increase here with a lot of the indices in terms of agricultural production. But in this period, we don't see any correlation between this and the indices of whether it is hay or more milk or meat or whatever. We do not see any correlation. So why was this second wave here? So this first wave was hay fields mostly, but the second wave, well, it was still subsidized and it was considered land improvement. It's easy for us to look backwards and judge, you know, but it was considered land improvement at the time. It was still paid for. And also the farmers were even criticized at the time. I don't know if you see this. We had tremendous soil erosion in the highlands of the Highland Road. And we were grazing, we were putting a lot of sheep into the highlands, and farmers at this time in the 70s were criticized, why are you releasing sheep up into the highlands and grazing areas that are almost denuded? Why don't you drain the peatlands and put the sheep there? That's what the farmers then did. So we entered a period where there was the draining of rangeland, not agricultural fields anymore. And you see this here. This is in South Iceland. Here's a farm, and these are the agricultural fields. You see a dense network of ditches. Here's another farm. Here's another farm. And then they started draining all the rangeland. So and this is south of Selfoss flowing. It's just south of here. So now we ended up with a dense network of ditches, really altering most of the peatlands in large areas. And there's problems with some of it. In some places there's erosion of the peat in ditches, about 15% of the ditches. There's water issue. One thing that the farmers did, this is the this is the point where 3 farms could come together, and they would often put in ditches to demarcate the property because it was paid for it. But here it used to be a pond, and now it's drained. But also from the deeper layer of the peat within these wetlands, iron comes into solution because there's no oxygen deep in it. When it seeps out into the ditches, it precipitates out because in the presence of oxygen, it rusts and becomes soluble and colors of water like this. So this is also water quality issues. Here we see the ditches with this kind of water. This enters from the ditches into the rivers. And I live in Stokks area, small village south of here, and you see the lakes that get from the ditches, water from the ditches, they're all colored brown versus and here from the ditch here, versus the natural lakes are all clear blue. So I'm just reviewing some of changing some of the functions of these systems. Another issue is that when you drain them and you lower the water table substantially, of course, atmospheric just air enters the peat layer, oxygen enters, and it starts to break down. Because now, all of a sudden, all that organic matter, all the plant remains are available for organisms that can utilize it as energy source. It's just like we eat food, eat an apple, we break it down, control burning, and we expire carbon dioxide. So we have a lot of carbon dioxide and even N2O, which is also a greenhouse gas, coming from these drained areas. Maybe not so much per square meter, but we've drained such an extensive area, so when we add it all up together, it's tremendous amounts, and that's problematic. So, just to finish this, we have drained 4,200 square kilometers, are fully drained. estimated. Additional 2,000 to 3,000 kilometers have been disturbed, hydrologically at least. Only 3% of the mires or peatlands in southern Iceland remain undisturbed. Drained mires or peatlands constitute the single greatest source of greenhouse gases within Iceland. And less than 15%, and that's maybe the sad figure, but also positive, is used for agricultural fields. That means we're only utilizing a fraction of these areas. That means we can do a lot. We can do something to remedy the situation without, attacking, agricultural production or anything like that. Doesn't have to be any competition for land in terms of that. There's still very large areas that we could actually restore. And drained mires lack many of the ecosystem functions of intact mires, and the remaining functions are often degraded. So, wetland restorations, we've done quite a few, attempted this in quite a few places in Iceland now, and we've gained quite a bit of experience, and it's quite possible because so many places we've only put in the ditches and not done anything else. We haven't plowed the areas, we haven't fertilized it, we haven't changed everything. So you can just fill in the ditch in many places and you can restore the wetlands. This is from Western Iceland where it's restored and it gets wet again, and wetland plants colonize the area and you have a functioning peatland again. So restoration holds promise because in most areas no alteration has taken place other than the excavation of the ditches, and research indicates that peatland restoration establishes the former greenhouse gas balance of the peatland. So finally I'm back at Skálholt, and this is looking at the Skálholt property. Here we are, and this is the farm, the property or the land. It actually extends a little bit further up here. And you see this is a mapping of the drainage map layer, showing we've mapped all the drainage ditches in Iceland. And so you see there are some drained areas in there's of course, these are active fields today. And then there are some more other that are not ditches that are not associated with fields, and this is a very large wetlands in between the two rivers here. Well, the decision was made to restore in the summer of 2016, last summer. It was started the restoration, and this was just the initiation of the effort. Lots of people tossing in dirt into the ditch. And in the summer, yes, all in all 8 kilometers of ditches were filled and approximately 40 hectares of wetlands restored. And they filled in all of these ditches, and then this long one here, which is approximately, it's close to 4 kilometers long. And so this is the upper area, close to here. These were probably intended to be agricultural fields just by the density of ditches, but that never materialized. Here you see this was a gentle sloping peatlands. Many of your peatlands in Iceland are sloping. It's often a paradox to foreigners how you can have a wetland on a slope, but that's still a fact. And here you're looking at one of the ditches, well, several ditches here. In that area, and then the lower area, it's such a huge area, and I was up on the little mountain of Vörðufell, took this picture, and you can see where the ditch is, and you can see the change in the vegetation, where the drying vegetation has replaced the wetland vegetation. You see sort of dark line here. It's difficult to get a picture of it so long, but here it's close up, and close up of the water, which you can see is not the best quality. Anyway, so I was not present when they were filling with the machines filling in this, but they filled it in, and the area started wetting up, and it's quite promising. And we put up a lot of plots where we started experiments with establishing wetland vegetation. The various methods, I'm not going to explain them, but we are trying out different methods to establish wetland vegetation within the area and especially on the disturbed areas. So, just to finish this off, I'm going to go back out to global scale. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the United Nations Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. Okay, it was Kofi Annan. It was called for by Kofi Annan was at the time called for by the UN Secretary General in 2000, and I think the final report came in 2005. I think. Anyway, the 1,360 experts from 95 countries, 80% independent board. It was done very professionally, and the largest assessment of the health of the Earth ecosystems, and it was based on the approach of ecosystem services from these functions of wetlands, and separate traditional division of the ecosystem services into supporting services like nutrient cycling, soil formation, primary production, into provisioning services like food, freshwater food, fiber, fuel, regulating like climate regulation, flood regulation, disease regulation, water purification, and culture like aesthetic values, spiritual, educational, recreation. And in that report, there's a clear understanding of that these services that rendered by these ecosystems are vital in terms of the constituents of well-being, human well-being. And anyway, I'm not going to go into depth of that, but there was a huge report, and well worth to dive into, but there was a final statement from the board identifying key messages and conclusions that can be drawn from the assessments. And I'm just going to quote, I think, 5 or 6 of them. Everyone in the world depends on nature and ecosystem services to provide the conditions for decent, healthy, and secure life. Humans have made unprecedented changes to ecosystems in recent decades to meet growing demands for food, fresh water, fiber, and energy. These changes have helped to improve the lives of billions, but at the same time, they've weakened nature's ability to deliver other key services such as purification of air and water, protection from disasters, and provision of medicine, to name a few. And then here, there's the rest of the statements. I'm going to put 2 here. The loss of services derived from ecosystems is a significant barrier to the achievement of the Millennium Development Goals to reduce poverty, hunger, and disease. The pressure on ecosystems will increase globally in coming decades unless human attitudes and actions change. And note that human attitude and actions change. And just to finish this, I think it's obvious that in the long run, for example, that national parks or conservation areas alone can only maintain a fraction of Earth ecosystem services and biodiversity, and hence the challenge is therefore to ensure that in the world in general, human land use is organized and planned in such a fashion as to maintain ecosystem services for the long term. So I think in terms of although a very, very small step, the church restoring wetlands here at Skalholt, I think it is still quite significant in terms of change of. And I'm not saying that the church had the attitude of destroying humans, but ecosystems, but I think it's a change in attitude of realizing the importance of these systems, and that somehow we have to intertwine our use of these systems in such a way, or use them in such a way that we maintain their quality and their services and the wealth of this in these systems. Somehow we have to find a way to do that. Anyway, so thank you. That's it.